Good morning. We start our working day at Ukraine Crisis Media Center, and now we are going to speak about the activity of Vladimir Groisman activity and the results of the government activity during the year. How does Parliament support governmental draft legislation? Our guests are Committee of Voters of Ukraine organization, CEO of this organization, Oleksii Koshel and Denis Rybachok. Please welcome. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Today we present a research of Doslivna project. Monthly we present analytical report concerning the work of parliamentary factions, their activity and quality of draft laws. Today we present a research concerning different topic, cooperation of the Cabinet of Ministers and the Supreme Council of Ukraine. Today's topic is results of the government activity, whether Vladimir Groisman was able to establish such cooperation from April till April 2016 till April 2017. So the result and the main conclusion is that as of today, only each fifth draft law becomes the law, and the Supreme Council supports only 18.5%. Only 50 draft laws were adopted, and 16 in first reading were adopted. So Arseniy Yatsenyuk government had better results. The level of support of draft laws was 36.6. This is twice more. Also, we would like to focus attention on the fact that 19% of support of the draft laws, this is low results in conditions of the parliamentary republic. This level of draft laws should be about 80%, and in the European Union the level of support is about 4 out of 5 draft laws become laws, and in Great Britain more than 90% government draft laws become laws. Moreover, separate parliamentarians who submit draft laws, they increase their chances if they get support of the government, of positive assessment by the government. That's why these results are really low. What is the problem? We do not connect with the quality of governmental draft laws. This is a topic for separate discussion. We do not connect this to the cooperation between the government and the Supreme Council. The low level of support is connected with low scores and low efficiency of Ukrainian government. If we look at the number of draft laws that became laws in 2016, we will see about 160 laws. So the draft laws 261 that were submitted by the government. So this is low result, and this is a signal both for the government and for the parliament. For the government, they should establish new mechanisms of cooperation with the parliament, and the draft laws are adopted in the format of just putting them through. And the last draft law about autonomy of medical institutions and draft law on budget 2017, and now we should go back to those mechanisms that were proposed by the Prime Minister when he headed the Supreme Council. So there should be proper implementation of reform, any document that will envisage mid-term and long-term activity for the support of draft laws. This is really important, and for the Parliament this is a negative result, and it shows low level of efficiency of the work of the Verkhovna Rada. who votes for governmental draft laws. So these draft laws are supported by Coalition, People's Front, and Bloc of Petro Poroshenko. In your materials, you have infographics that show how this support happened. And People's Front provides 79% of vote, Petro Poroshenko Bloc 73% of vote. And our study shows that for the governmental draft laws, old coalition vote. So Samopomich faction that declared that they will become opposition, 65% of vote for the support of governmental draft laws. Radical Party of Oleksii Koshel, 60% to support governmental draft laws, but Kivshina Party that is a tough opposition provide 50% of the vote to support governmental draft laws, and the least support is provided by Voля Narodu, 36, Vidrodzenie 27, and opposition bloc that is boycotting the activity of the parliament provides only 19% to support governmental draft laws. So, governmental draft laws, they are not supported, and old coalition works, and it shows not only in this, but also if we consider the work of the parliament, and we carried out this research for the last half year. Next conclusion. The most productive and less productive ministers in the government concerning cooperation with the Supreme Council. The most efficient ministers in Groisman's government is the Minister of Regional Development, Gennady Zubko, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Pavlo Klimkin, and the Minister of Finance, Alexander Daniluk. The draft laws are becoming the laws the most now. We have different indicators of the support of the draft laws and cooperation with the parliament and address to parliamentary committees. And if we are speaking about cooperation with the Supreme Council, Zubko, Abilyan, and Semirak cooperating with the Supreme Council. We are speaking about personal presentation, presence at meetings, and work on the committees. Zubko and Omilyan frequently present their draft laws in the parliament. Zubko was presented many draft laws, and Omilyan 13 draft laws, and they also addressed 35 times the Supreme Council, and starting April 2016, these ministers were presented 75 draft laws, and others were reported by other officials. So the ministers presented only each third draft law in the parliament. That we believe this figure should be different concerning the support of the parliament of governmental draft laws. The ministers that didn't have good cooperation with the Supreme Council, the Minister of Finance, Alexander Daniluk, so draft laws are presented by his deputies. He presented draft laws only 8 times, and 32 times the draft laws were presented by his deputies. Also, he is active, and he is the leader in the work on the committees, but he was not able to establish proper communication with the Finance Committee, and he is often criticized by this committee. And I give the floor to my colleague, please.
In our research, we considered not only how the government communicate with Verkhovna Rada but also how each minister has interaction with the government, how each minister interacts with the Verkhovna Rada, with the parliament. So ministers should have in place adequate cooperation with the Verkhovna Rada. The most productive, the most efficient ministers are those who are the authors of the most past bills. We looked which ministries were authors of the bills, and we calculated how many bills were enacted by the Verkhovna Rada, who is the author, which ministry is the author. The most efficient, the most productive ministers are Gennady Zubko, Pavlo Klimkin, Yevgen Nishuk, Stepan Partolak, Lilia Grinevich, Alexander Daniluk. In fact, the Verkhovna Rada pass 50% of the bills authored by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, 33% of those from the Ministry of Culture, and 31% of those produced by the Ministry of Defense. When the governmental draft laws are not pending in the Verkhovna Rada, but they are enacted, this is a plus for the Verkhovna Rada. High percentage of the ministry high efficiency of the Ministry of Finance is also observed. 51% of generated by the draft laws were passed. The Ministry of Finance, they produce budget-related bills, so this is an expected figure that these laws have been passed. The Ministry of Infrastructure, headed by Omelan, is also efficient. Every fourth draft law is enacted. Some ministers who are the authors of the bills, they are anti-leaders, like Minister of Economic Development Kubiv and Minister of Social Development Treva. They submitted most of draft laws, more than other ministries, but they have not been passed. 32 out of 4 produced by the Ministry of Economic Development bills were passed. So we should say also about attitudes in the Verkhovna Rada. Some draft laws which concern decentralization, they have more chances to be enacted. Sometimes the lobbyists draft law, when the ministry submit them to the parliament, even there are 3 dozens and only 3 or 4 are enacted. This situation is not adequate, and in general this demonstrates some inefficiency of individual ministries. In our research, we also based on how individual ministers conduct their activities, what do they do, so that the Verkhovna Rada pass their draft laws. The Verkhovna Rada appoints the ministers and have impact on them, and it can bring resignation of the ministers, so they should cooperate actively with the Verkhovna Rada. We reviewed 3 mechanisms how ministers can work with the parliament. The first mechanism is the participation of the ministers in the hour of questions and answers. The MPs say that ministers just do not want to appear and report at these meetings. The situation is interesting also in that Mr. Groisman chaired the Verkhovna Rada. He called the ministers to come to the parliament and cooperate with MPs, so it was expected that Mr. Groisman would improve the situation in this, so the participation of ministers in the Verkhovna Rada hour of questions and answers. The second was the appearance of ministers at the meetings of committees in Verkhovna Rada. The third feature is presentation of the draft laws in the Verkhovna Rada. At the plenary session start, the draft laws presentations are appointed, and it is very good when ministers conduct such presentations. Then these bills are recognized as more important when this is not a deputy minister who presents it. So we generated a rating of successful cooperation of the ministers with the Verkhovna Rada. 3 ministers were efficient according to this rating. Gennady Zubko, Minister of Regional Development, Omelian, and Semerak. Omelian is the Minister of Economic Development, and Semerak is the Minister of Ecology. They present their speeches in the parliament, and they created good cooperation, established good cooperation with the Verkhovna Rada. This practice is very positively assessed by us in general, starting with April 2016 and ending with March 2017. The sessions of questions and answers at the Verkhovna Rada took place. There were 17 meetings. Zubko appeared at 17, Semerak at 15 meetings, and Minister of Ecology took part in 14 meetings of questions and answers at the Verkhovna Rada. All ministers should appear there, and if someone is absent, this is a question to such minister. We also would like to mention that Gennady Zubko, Volodymyr Omelian, and Ostap Semerak, they presented draft laws in Verkhovna Rada. Most often Zubko 14 times, Omelian 13 times, and Semerak 7 times. Every third draft law were presented in person by ministers, but there is a negative trend. It continues when draft laws in the parliament are presented by deputy ministers. This concerns Ministry of Finance and also Ministry of Economic Development. The Minister of Finance, Daniluk, only 8 times appeared and presented the draft laws. Status of these ministers, they are most powerful ones, so maybe ministers have too many assignments, too many tasks, and they can't appear when it is needed in the parliament, but this is not positive practice. Ministers should work more with the MPs. We in our research considered such an issue as requests, MPs a request to the ministers. We observed how many questions MPs have to the ministers. Most often the requests are sent to Alexander Daniluk, Arsen Avakov, and Uliana Suprun, talking about the personalities. Many requests to Arsen Avakov. This is a quite well expected trend, because law enforcement ministry is really of interest, but as concerns Uliana Suprun and requests to her, this is mostly attributable to problems in this ministry, and Arsena Vakov in general since April 2016 received 195 requests, Alexander Daniluk 109, Uliana Supruk 114 requests from MPs. Ministers received more than 1,000 MPs requests in general. This could prove that not all ministers have good cooperation, good coordination with the Verkhovna Rada. At the same time, some abuse by MPs with this mechanism of MP request is also observed. Sometimes requests are used not for good purpose, but the trend is demonstrated by this indicator. There are some ministers efficiently cooperating with the Verkhovna Rada, and some ministers who has been working not successfully with the Verkhovna Rada, and they should improve their activities indicators. Thank you, colleagues. Do you have questions? Are there questions among the audience? I have some specifying questions. You said at the beginning of your speech about the experience and percentage ratios in European countries, and you quoted an example of Great Britain. Have you researched what mechanisms or what best practices we can use in Ukraine in cooperation between Verkhovna Rada and government of Ukraine? Thank you for your question. Yes, Europe demonstrating 8% to 90% of high rates of cooperation in Great Britain, but the approach to legislative power, to legislative body activities, it differs, and they can just vote blindly for bills. But anyway, we should use some of their best practices. First of all, this is very close cooperation between government and parliament. They work as one body, as a whole. What does it mean? 1 year ago, before voting in the parliament, Groisman answered to the question to the program of his government. He said that this is the coalition agreement, but there is European practices when the coalition agreement is a unified document or very similar documents both in the parliament and in the government, which are characterized by the same methodology. But this problem is not of this government but also of other governments of Ukraine. There have not ever been a close cooperation between government and parliament in Ukraine. Last week the government declared the reforms, land reform, pension reform and healthcare reform by 95%. These reforms coincide with the coalition agreement, but we are surprised that no political force has not declared yet their positions, their stance, whether they support or not these reforms, whether they have already draft laws generated. They only declared their emotional attitude, so we should change the approach to legislative activities and also set the norm which is present in other countries' constitutions, that an MP cannot be an author of a bill 5% or more till 10%, up to 10% of MPs could be the authors of bills, because now we have much legislative spam, which is used as just PR tool. There are some absurd bills pending in the Parliament. We should develop some integrated actions, measures to improve the work of our Parliament. Thank you, Oleksii. Thank you, Denise. So we will talk about the quality of draft laws, how they should be submitted. We will talk in our